We're going to devote our energies to sports and gardening, all the cultural pursuits as far as they're concerned. In fact, we're going to put the goons to sleep. Meanwhile, we dig.
Greetings and welcome to the Anadromist. This is your host, Burn Power, coming to you from a beautiful day here in Tbilisi, Georgia, where there is not even a hint of cool weather at the moment. It's just lovely, perfect weather. I think anybody would say that. So what are we going to do today? Well, you've probably seen the title of the video already, 10 Obscure Songs to Encourage You. Songs to give you a bit of courage during these strange times. But why the obscure part? I could have chosen 10 songs that we all know and love that, provide a bit of courage to people, or songs that are very familiar. And that would be very easy to do. But I thought to myself, if it's a song you most likely have never heard, or have only heard very seldom, it's more likely you'll pay attention to it without imposing your memories on it. This is a problem that some people have, where what they do is they hear a song and immediately kind of go into a fantasy of when they first heard that song or when that song was important to them. And I don't want to encourage that for this. Other times, I do want to encourage you to go back in your memories, but this time I want to just give you a few songs you probably never heard. I would say most of these will fall in the category. I mean, many of them, you can't find anything on the internet hardly about them. Some of them, there's one song here, there are less than 10 copies known to exist of the actual record. The following song, the first song we're going to play, Black Thank You Packages by the Paupers. Well, both the group and the song might as well just have vanished. I do believe there's some sort of just short blurb about the Paupers on Wikipedia, and you can find a few recollections of who they might have been, but what's the song? And the song is very mysterious. We'll get to that in just a moment. But first, I do want to encourage you to subscribe to the channel if you like this stuff. Or you can just give a like if you haven't got the wherewithal to subscribe for free. Or if you don't like my channel, that's fine. You don't have to tell me about it. By the way, if there's songs here you don't like, please do not write that on the comment section. There's no need for that. It's just like, oh, I really didn't like that song. So what? Tell me about the song that you did like. And I'm not saying that just to be positive. I'm saying that because those kind of comments accomplish absolutely nothing. And if I see that kind of comment, I'm simply going to delete it. So there you go. I mean, if you want to just be the person who says like, ooh, well, I like all your songs except for that one, Why would that even matter to me? Why? or should I have not included it? People do stuff like that. The internet drives us insane, thinking we have to give our opinion on stuff. Well, we don't. And I've pointed this out to friends, fiends, on Facebook. People have known for a while, you play something, and someone did this about a song. I put some song on Facebook and said, here's a song that I find that I think really has something. And then a friend just writes, I didn't see anything in that song. And I wrote back, why did you need to even tell me that? You could have just said nothing. And then she deleted the comment, which was nice. So, because that kind of comment means nothing. And so, anyway, I'm going on too long about that. But people do tend to have these reactions to movies, music, books. If they've read something, they want to tell you how bad they thought it was. And I think music is more than any of them because you hear music immediately, and here's the big lie. you don't hear music immediately. When I first hear an album or a song, I don't sit there listening whether I think it's the greatest song in the world or whatever. I'll often put an album on, and I do buy CDs and vinyl. Even in Georgia, I have them shipped to me, because you can't buy them on the streets here hardly. There's one place that sells some electronic music and a little bit of jazz, but, I don't really need that much of that stuff right now. But, yeah, you think you hear a song quickly. This is what Rick Mocker was talking in his What is Reality lecture. We think we see things quickly. We think we hear things quickly. You don't. You don't know what a song is like until you've heard it several times, which is the reason that people who program music program the songs over and over and over again, because they know they have to drill it into your head. And actually, there's a weird effect that if you hear a song enough, you start to like it, even if you didn't like it when you first heard it. It really happens, and we've all been subject to that effect. Well, oh yeah, you could, the other thing, before we actually get into the meat of what we're doing here, the other thing you could do is, besides subscribe, like, share the video if you think it's worth sharing, is you could contribute to the channel. And there's a PayPal link below. And believe me, in these days of inflation, my money ain't what it used to be here. So here in Tbilisi, Georgia, it's still good, but I can feel it. I feel like, I'm getting, I'm on a fixed income. And I get drips and drabs of money through this, but I can feel things tightening up. And I'm sure you all can, so I'm not begging. I'm just simply saying, if you feel like supporting the channel, do it. Okay, done. First song, Black Thank You Packages by the Paupers. I have absolutely no idea what a black thank you package is. And I think that's why I love this song, is because it can be interpreted in multiple ways. Is it a dark gift? Well, evidently. But what does that mean? Is it a truth you won't like? Is it an object that has dark meaning? But why is it a package? Is the package dark or is the thing dark? You see, there's all this. And then there's this chorus that goes on and on. Dear Mr. Friend, please take my hand. But I think that's why I like it too. I like it because we don't know what the dark thank you package is. And we like it because it's a song about someone trying to learn something. And how many songs are there about that? So it's like, please take my hand, show me what you got. Teach me something. Do you have some wisdom? That's what the song is about. And the Paupers were a garage band. They started off as a folky band, became a garage band, and then kind of ended up doing psychedelic kind of garage rock. They started off in 1965. I think they were called the Spats, and then they changed their name when there was another group called the Spats. Why would people want to be called? Were they named after the shoes or having arguments with people, or both? But then they became the Paupers. I guess they were very poor, and they actually were in Toronto, Canada. They went down to New York City. They were getting a good buzz in Toronto from publicity and people coming to their shows. So they went to New York City on a trip where they were introduced to the famous, or is it infamous, Albert Grossman, who was Bob Dylan's manager. And he was a guy who in 1967 already had long hair and long gray hair and a beard, which really raises some questions. When did this guy start growing his hair long? Because most people, but I think it was like mid-60s, like everybody else. But he basically saw them and said, what a fantastic band. He signed them to be their manager. They made a couple albums, but the most important one is called The Magic People. An amazing song, which this was the flip side of. And I remember as a kid, I had the single, but And as much as I like the Magic People, it's a great song, lots of percussion, these strange sort of guitar effects and stuff. But it was turning it over. I really loved Black Thank You Packages. And this is one of my all-time favorite songs. There will be a few of these on this. And nobody's ever heard of this song, which is why I love it. It's kind of like mine. So I'm sharing it with you. Maybe you'll find it interesting, or maybe not. Like I said, if not, don't elaborate. Just listen or don't. That's how it goes. Anyway, they were supposed to play at the Monterey Pop Festival, which they did, and everything went wrong. Their bass player was way too pickled in the acid, couldn't keep up with the band, and they were known for their tightness as a band. And so they were no longer tight, because the bass, as many of you musicians know, holds the band together along with the drummer. And this guy was a great bass player, but the acid did him in. Eventually they had to kick him out of the band. They did play at the Fillmore Auditoriums in California, in San Francisco. People liked them then, but they had a disastrous set at the Monterey Pop Festival. There were supposed to be all these industry people there, people who would make their careers. They played terribly. They had equipment problems. Rather than stop and fix it, they just plunged through the set, and everything went wrong. And that was the beginning of the end of their career. And by 1968, they were a historical oddity. And so, without any further ado, Black Thank You Packages by the Paupers.
Please, Mr. Friend, please take my hand, lead me along, teach me your song. Teach me to feel, see things for real. What shall I do to be just like you? Mr. Friend, please take my hand, give me the chance to learn how you dance. I want to do things that are new. I want to go to those places you know. Black thank you packages there. If you want to go, son, then come along, have no fear. Get your black thank you packages. Get your black thank you packages. Then you can feel like me. Please, Mr. Friend, please take my hand, lead me along, teach me your song. I want to do things that are new. I want to go to those places you know. Please
The next tune, I did write songs to encourage you, and is a song a tune? And I'd say no, because a song has to have lyrics. But we kind of use this in casual parlance. And so what are you going to do? Right? Obscure tunes? Then it sounds like I'm doing instrumentals. But this is a tune. It's an instrumental by a gentleman from Ireland who passed away in 2018. He lived from 1950 to 2018. Michael O'Sullivan. And the record album cover is coming up here in a moment. If you watch how it's spelled, that's how it's actually spelled in Gaelic in Ireland. And so many Irish people change the spellings of their names. It is, although I believe it's Mícheál O'Sullivan or something like that. I don't know exactly the Irish pronunciation of Sullivan, but it's complicated. But this song's called Bonaparte Crossing the Rhine. Now, there's a bluegrass song in America called the same thing. This is not the same tune at all. This is an Irish version. I believe this is Michael O'Sullivan's own version of something like that tune, or it was based on something original. But he is a composer, was a composer. And this was on this very obscure label in Ireland from 1976, and this was called, the company was called Gael Lynn. And Gael Lynn, I love their music because it is so, it was all the music was supposed to be in Gaelic, or in this case, instrumental. Just amazing stuff. But a lot of songs about Bonaparte, or tunes rather, named after Napoleon Bonaparte, during the Napoleonic Wars. And so this is Bonaparte Crossing the Rhine. But if you look on the cover of the record, you'll see horse racing. And the Irish are really wild about horse racing. It is one of their most traditional sports. And they have this very specific, like silk shirts, and usually of a kind of two or three different colors. Very specific kind of jockey hat, part of which we've borrowed in America. But the Irish have this real thing about horses, and when I listen to this song, I can think of nothing more than horse racing. And I think this is why there's a horse and jockey. Horse racing and jockeys on the front of the album. Napoleon Crossing the Rhine, Michael O'Sullivan. Speaking of historical music. The next piece is a sea shanty, and it's called General Taylor. And we're eventually going to hear a version of this by the Newfoundland, Canada band called Great Big Sea. But before we do that, I'd like you to hear various people interpreting the lyrics of the song. I've strung about 4 or 5 of them together here. And let's just listen to the song for a moment. The lyrics refer to General Zachary Taylor, who later became President Taylor in America, and he died in the middle of his reign, in the middle of his presidency, in 1850. So this song was composed sometime after 1850. He was a hero to the Americans in the Mexican-American War. And actually his leadership in that lasted until 1846. So he only became president shortly thereafter. But regardless of what the war was about, nevertheless, he was at that time considered a hero. And his nickname was Old Stormy. And you'll hear this, they'll say, where are you, Stormy? And then they say, walk him along, John, carry him along. And it's about burying him. And I think that there is this sense, it's like this honorable thing, the way you bury a person. And it's like the song is filled with courage. It's about the courage of battle, but it's also about the sea shanty. That is to say, the sea shanties would be performed with these songs going with very specific functions on board the ship. So there would be someone singing a line, and then the various sailors hoisting or turning various devices on the tall ship, or maybe at the end they'd be hoisting the anchor and bringing up the anchor. I'm sorry, I don't know all the nautical terms. Someone will correct me, I'm sure. But just being on a ship in those days was an act of courage, because, oh my goodness, what a difficult life that was. I mean, most of what we do by comparison today has no courage attached to it whatsoever. I mean, there are jobs that do. If you work in the sewers of New York City, that's a job that requires a bit of courage. If you're a policeman and you're dealing with criminals all the time, that requires a bit of courage. Being a fireman requires a bit of courage. Being an ER worker requires a bit of courage. But there's no courage involved in sitting and typing. There's no courage involved in being a cashier at McDonald's, or front of the store, or whatever they're calling it now, trying to make it sound like less of a, I'm not just a clerk, I'm in the front. This is a great song. So let's hear a few versions of this first, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about it before we play Great Big Sea doing General Taylor. And by the way, the first version of this we're hearing, the first section, is by Steel Eye Span, who are the people who, in a sense, revived this in the late 60s. And so we hear a little of their version, then a little bit of some other versions as well. Take it away.
General Taylor gain the day.
Walk him along, John, carry him along.
Oh, General Taylor gain the day.
Carry him to his burying ground.
Where you stormy.
Walk him along, John, carry him along.
Why you stormy.
Carry him to his burying ground.
I wish I was old Stormy son. Walk him along, John, carry him along. I'd build a ship 10,000 ton. Carry him to his burying ground. To me way, hey, you Stormy. Walk him along, John, carry him along. to me where you store me. Carry him to his burying ground.
We'll load it down with ale and rum, walk him along, John, carry him along. And every shellback should have sung, carry him to his burying ground. To me where you store me, walk him along, John, carry him along. To me where you store me, carry him to his burying ground.
We'll lower him down on a golden chain, walk him along, John, carry him along, and on every link we'll carve his name, carry him to his burying ground. Tell me where store me, walk him along, John, carry him along. Tell me where store me, carry him to his burying ground.
Well, General Taylor's dead and gone, walk him along, John, carry him along. Well, General Taylor's dead and gone, carry him to his burying ground. To me, way, hey, Stormy, walk him along, John, carry him along. To me, way, hey, Stormy, carry him to his burying ground.
So you can see that the song is perfect for harmony singing, perfect for this kind of, it's definitely a sea shanty. And I love sea shanties. I have quite a few records of sea shanties at home. And the Folkways people, who are now Folkways Smithsonian, have some great records of sea shanties, and I recommend them if you can find them. Which reminds me, I wonder if they have actually put them out. I have mine on old vinyl copies, and they were out of the Seaport Museum in Mystic, Connecticut. And so there you are. But we're about to hear a very different version of this by Great Big Sea. They're a very popular band in Canada, fairly unknown in America. And one thing you're going to see here is something very different. You're going to see a large audience of Canadians singing along with this. And this is just a huge concert. And these people are going nuts for a sea shanty. And Great Big Sea has more than one sea shanty in their repertoire and quite a few songs. Newfoundland was kind of forgotten about during a lot of the 20th century. And so they managed to keep quite a few old songs that don't exist in other places. And this is a great version of this, but you'll notice it's a lot more produced, a lot more dramatic. But what I want you to see is the crowd. And that people will say, well, these are old-fashioned songs. How can these things live again? Except, some small folk group. And you'll see the answer to your question in this video. Take it away, Great Big Sea, General Taylor.
Oh, General Taylor gained the day, walk 'em along. Well, General Taylor, he gained the day. Tell me where you store me, walk 'em along, John, carry 'em along. Tell me where you store me, carry him to his burying ground. We'll dig his grave with our silver spade, walk 'em along, John, carry him along. His shroud of the finest silk will be made, carry him to his burying ground. Tell me where you store me, walk 'em along, John, carry him along. Tell me where you store me, carry him to his burying ground. We'll lower him down on a golden chain, walk him along, John, carry him along. On every inch we'll carve his name, carry him to his burying ground. Tell me where you store me, walk him along, John, carry him along. Tell me where you store me, carry him to his burying ground. Well, General Taylor, he's all the go. Walk him along, John, carry him along. He's gone where the stormy winds won't blow. Carry him to his burying ground. Tell me where you store me. Walk him along, John, carry him along. Tell me where you store me, carry him to his burying ground. Well, a pint of rum for every man. Walk him along, John, carry him along. And a bloody great big barrel for the shanty man. Carry him to his burying ground. Tell me where you store me. Walk him along, John, carry him along. Tell me where you store me, carry him to his burying ground. Well, General Taylor, he's dead and he's gone. Won't you walk him along, John, carry him along. Well, General Taylor, he's long dead and gone. Carry him to his burying ground. Tell me where you store me. Walk him along, John, carry him along. Tell me where you store me. His burying ground.
Okay, now we're into what I would call unfortunately obscure territory. Unfortunately obscure because the group we're about to listen to is a group called Reverend Glasseye and his Wooden Leg, or just Reverend Glasseye. And Adam Glasseye is the main writer and singer. He really got his start doing music in the Boston area, eventually relocated to Austin, and then just stopped doing Reverend Glasseye material and still makes music, but I think this was very special. It's definitely American Gothic music, like 16 Horsepower. Tom Waits could be considered American Gothic. Bob Dylan's John Wesley Harding could be considered American Gothic. Ry Cooder does some very spooky stuff that could be considered American Gothic. American Gothic basically is a kind of an Americana music, which has elements from the past. It can have bluesy, country, even jazzy elements, but then it has elements from music hall and cabaret and circus music and all these more antique elements as well. And this is one of my favorite songs by him. He put out about 3 albums. I have them all. And unfortunately, nobody really heard his music. At that time, we were already transitioning away from rock music on the radio into this kind of diva pop music where, you know, all Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, all these people were already huge. And there wasn't a place on the radio for anything like this. Even the indie college stations didn't really get into this music. They didn't understand it. But when I heard this, I said, whoa, what is this? And in fact, I've done a series of essays on American Gothic culture, which was based on my discovery of a lot of this music about 2011, which was after it was already pretty much over. But this song is called Sleep, Sweet Countrymen. And Adam, his real name is Beckley. Adam Beckley's words here are like Shakespearean, like Moby Dick. They are complex words. And I love the fact that he's not dumbing anything down at all in his music. Not only that, the invention of the tune and what he does with it is great. Is this the most polished music in the world? No. Would I want it to be? No. And this song, Sleep Sweet Countrymen, what is the song about? I've been pondering this song ever since I first heard it, and I'm not sure what it's about. It has to do with something with men fighting in a war. It kind of has an old-fashioned feel. It also has, to me, it strikes me as being a little bit like Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. The language in there is dense and such, although this is not nearly that dense. But what I've done is I've put some images. There are no videos. And in fact, with most of these, the reason I've made videos for them is because these songs are so obscure they don't have videos, with the exception of Great Big Sea doing their live performance. But most of the rest of these don't have any official videos with them, so I've crafted my videos. And in this case, there are a couple of other videos and live performances, but none of him doing this song. And so what I've done is I've kind of just pretended there was a video of him doing this song. And I used some imagery of him playing, none of it to this song, so you don't look for the lips to sync up, they won't. But what I've also done is added photos of soldiers from the Civil War, the First World War, and everything in between. Old antique photos of American soldiers in different roles, different guises, different styles. And I feel like that somehow matches with the story. I've also included the words running along the bottom so that if you go back and look, and eventually I will put this up as a separate standalone little video just so you can look at it over and over and try to understand what he's talking about. But there is something of courage here. There's a sense of bloodshed. There's a sense of defeat. There's a sense of looking for justice in the midst of the chaos. But the way he sings the Sleep, Sweet Countrymen, until we need you again, there's this sense of, maybe there is something honorable worth fighting for, and to not be betrayed by the higher ups in the government. That's what I kind of glean from this. So, Reverend Glasseye and his wooden leg, Sleep, Sweet Countrymen.
I pledge allegiance to our countrymen. Our country, it is safe again as we safely go to bed at night in our warm nest. I sing my song. I have been this place before. I spoke on to the children. My hands, they seem to tremble the closer I get. I'm a very stupid man, and I'll lead them to the slaughter. Same for son and daughter of a failing every man. I'll love me some lovely gifts, but the price it is uncertain, and the way it is so dangerous to those of little pride. And I'll wash my hands clean in the waters of optimism, contaminating buzz with ego sacrifice, my friends. Ego sacrifice, ego sacrifice, my friends. Oh, ego sacrifice. Sleep, sweet countrymen, till we need you again. Jews are asleep in our holy land of questions. The most important lesson, if they get it out loud. And I call out to the parson, he waves his hands against me. My countrymen like Christians when the lions arrive. And I call out to the general in his most vital position as the king of isolation in this land of suicides. And I call out to the maidens who wear the belts of jackals and little else but shackles. Fill our lust-filled appetites, my friends. Lust-filled appetites. Our lust-filled appetites, my friend. Our lust-filled appetites. This sweet countryman is where our past will land. Your duty's fair and just. My duty's what I must. Fondly I'll think of you in what I have to do. I'll burn the chapel house and make attempts at truce. And at 11:59 I'll hoist your flag and make it mine. Against the wall it's closing time. I'll send your wounded down the line. And I will count the ways, oh, each and every day. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So please rise for the very honored judge. The jury has yet to appear. We'll make this Gallopool your home. We'll make our motives very clear. Rise for the very honored judge. The jury has yet to appear. We'll make this Gallopool your home. We'll make our motives very clear. Rise for the very honored judge. The jury has yet to appear. We'll make this Gallopool your home. We'll make our motives very clear. Rise for the very honored judge. The jury has yet to appear. We'll make this Gallopool your home. We'll make our motives very clear. Rise for the very honored judge. The jury has yet to appear. We'll make this Gallopool your home. We'll make our motives very clear. Rise for the very honored judge. The jury has yet to appear. We'll make this Gallopool your home. We'll make our motives very clear. Sweet countrymen, oh my countrymen. Sing, sweet countrymen, oh my countrymen. Sleep, sweet countrymen, oh my countrymen. Sleep, sweet country, sleep, sweet countrymen.
Now we're going into really mysterious territory. Geeshie Wiley, sometimes known as Geechie Wiley, and Geechie is a word which it comes from the Gullah people, who were African Americans who were brought here, and they lived in the Georgia Sea Islands. They still do, and while they speak English, they speak a very strange kind of English with extra words in it, which come from Western Africa. And in all of America, they are the place that has most stayed closest to what Africans were like from the Western Africa during the time of slavery. And their language, their slang, their Africanisms, their music, and the rest of it are connected to this. And so a Geeshie would have been a person, they may have been people, I have a record where there's an old black jazz musician talking, and he says that the Geeshies were from South Carolina. Well, there is a river called the Ogeechee River, which runs through Georgia. So there's a zone between South Carolina and Georgia, the Sea Islands there. And this was the area of the Gullah people. Now, having explained the word Geechee to you, or Geeshie as it's written on the record, and it could be either one, there was no set pronunciation, I'm sure it was different in different places. Who was Geeshie Wiley? Frankly, no one really knows. That's how mysterious this is. Now, we do know that Geeshie Wiley recorded 3 songs around 1930 on the monumental Paramount label, this obscure blues label that some people try their whole lives to collect all of them. I believe Jack Black put out a series of, not Jack Black, Jack White, Black, White, whatever. Jack White of White Stripes put out a series of albums of all the Paramount records. But they're old 78s, like the one we're about to hear. It's got scratches on it, yeah. And the truth is there are only 10 or less copies of this record that survive. I heard this through the documentary called Crumb about the underground comic book artist R. Crumb, whom I will be discussing in another video coming up sometime. And essentially, this is just this extremely special song. Now, in listening to the lyrics, it's called The Last Kind Word Blues. She talks about her father going off to the German wars. You won't pick this up the first time you hear it. And the last things he said to her. And the truth is, her father didn't come back. Some people say that this was a woman named Lily Mae Boone who lived from 1908 to 1950. But nobody's really sure about that. Also in this song she says, her mother said to me. So these are also the last kind words that her mother said as well. And essentially, this song is about the courage of living. Essentially, this woman is an orphan by the time she's singing this song. She has no one else in her family, although there is a woman who would claim to be her sister and who also had the last name of Wiley. Again, we're not sure exactly who these people are. They are lost in the mist of time. And in fact, in the video which I've created for this, the first woman you see, this very old woman you see, is her sister. But alas, that photo was taken quite a while ago, at least 50 or 60 years ago. And so we don't know much about her either. This guy named Don Kent wrote some liner notes for an album of Mississippi blues musicians. So evidently, Geeshie Wiley lived in Mississippi Delta region where so much great blues comes from. And he wrote, if Geeshie Wiley did not exist, she could not be invented. Her scope and creativity dwarfs most blues artists. She seems to represent the moment when black secular music was coalescing into the blues. Fascinating. And the music is haunting. And I believe it shows courage towards living. Geeshie Wiley, Last Kind Word Blues.
The last kind word I hear my daddy say, Lord, the last kind word I hear my daddy say. If I die in the German war, I want you to send my body, send it to my mother-in-law. If I get killed, please don't bear my soul. I can't just leave me out, let the buzzer see me home. When you see me coming, look across the Richmond field. And if I don't bring you flour, I'll bring you both in you. I went to the depot, I looked up at the sun, cried, some train don't come, gonna be some walking done. My mama told me just before she died, Lord, said daughter, don't you be so wise. The Mississippi River, you know it's deep and wide. I can stand right here, see my baby from the other side. What you do to me, baby, it never gets out of me. I mean, I have to cross the deep.
And now we're going to listen to a gospel quartet who often sang with more than 4 people, 4 men. They were sometimes a quintet or more. What's interesting about this group is they started in 1928 and they're still going. They had one member who was 92 years old while he was performing. But what it is they became an organization, in a sense, with rotating members. And they would learn the style. And at a certain point, that style became defunct. Later, and this happened with some other gospel quartets as well, they took on more of a pop background or a rock background. But we're going to listen to a song of theirs called I'll Live Again, which is from about, what do we say here, about 1939 or so, around the same time that the Golden Gate Quartet was making their music. Interestingly enough, black gospel music is one of the greatest forms of music in America. And most people couldn't tell you the name of a song except the only hit that ever crossed over into the larger world was Oh Happy Day by the Edwin Hawkins Singers. But apart from that, most of what we know about gospel music, most people don't know anything. And then they'll say things like, oh, I like Go Tell It on the Mountain, or Down by the Riverside. Not knowing those are not gospel songs. They can be done in a gospel manner, but those are in fact another older style called spirituals, which are really a mixture of black and white music. But gospel music, oh my goodness, I really should raise your hands or write a comment if you think I should do something on gospel music coming up in the not too distant future, but it's not going to be right away. But I will do something. there's music there that'll completely impress you. We'll say that without any over hyperbole or elaboration. Just very impressive, very beautiful, very strong. And this song is a good illustration. I'll Live Again. Now, there is no filmed performance of them at all doing this during that period. And in fact, there's very few films that were taken of black performers all the way through the mid-60s. I mean, try to find a film of B.B. King singing in the early 60s, or Muddy Waters singing in the 50s, or Howlin' Wolf singing in the 50s. There are some from the 60s and 70s, but none when these people were at their peak. People just didn't think it worth putting on film. People didn't document everything like we do today. And so it makes it, in a sense, more powerful. And this is a very powerful gospel song. And what I've done is I've edited it together with a later version of the song, which was done kind of differently, but it occasionally syncs up, by the group much, much later. So, without any more hesitation on my part, let's listen to I'll Live Again by the Dixie Hummingbirds.
I'm a servant of the King, oh, praising His holy name. And if I live this life and die, I'll live again. That's why every day of my life, trying to keep my lamps trimmed and burning, and to make sure they won't go out. I won't be like the foolish versions. Again. Oh yes, I live again. 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 See my mother, father too. Tell them all, get it through. St. Peter, St. Paul, see my Jesus. First of all, I live in glory, tell the story, shout, hallelujah, troubles will all be over. I live again, I live again, see my mother, father too, tell it all, get it through, St. Peter, St. Paul, see my Jesus, first of all, then I'll move up in glory, then I'll tell the story, I will shout, hallelujah, I'll be shouting, hallelujah, yes, hallelujah, I'm shouting, hallelujah, troubles will all be over.
Let's change gears here. Let's do a little rock and roll music. Here's an obscure band. They put out an album that was on a somewhat major label, or at least a subsidiary of a major label. Which major label escapes me right now? Capitol Records or MCA or something like that. But this is a group called Jimmy Mack and the Jumpers from 1981. They're from the New York City area. This is them doing something like power pop, kind of like, power chords and such, but not doing heavy metal, not doing commercial hard rock, which would have been like Journey and Foreigner, not doing They were very influenced also by Springsteen, Bruce Springsteen, who was doing all of these city, urban kinds of songs before the word urban became a synonym for black. And so this is what I would call working class rock and roll. And this is called Main Street. And this song is about making sure you're out on Main Street to face your enemy. Now, he doesn't explain exactly what the issue is. Is it a fight? More than likely. But is it also, it could be a race on the street. He says, I've got to show my face or be damned. This is all about having the courage to face your opponents. And now I couldn't find any visual video evidence of these people. Certainly nothing related to this song. But I thought to myself, okay, I was in New York City in 1980. I was there I was actually there even a year earlier briefly in 1979. And I was in New York City from 1980 then till 1996. So there's a very specific vibe about the very tail end of the 70s, the beginning of the 80s, up until about 84 or so in New York City. And I thought I would capture this sense, mostly on the East Coast here, of visual. There were these different documentaries made about these places. Some about car racing, some about street life in the Bronx. And so what I did is I wet it all together because it seemed like these went with this music. It's the same kind of world that Bruce Springsteen is writing songs about racing in the streets. And I think that there's a moment here. There's a kind of thing. Eventually Bruce Springsteen becomes like Mr. America. It becomes like represents the working man, but in an almost abstract sense because he by this time is a multimillionaire. But these guys are really just, basically a bar band. So let's listen to Jimmy Mack and the Jumpers, 1981, Main Street.
Street.
Okay, let's go back to the folky movement, which kind of got going in the late 50s on university campuses and then into the 60s. And there were folkies, particularly Greenwich Village in New York, but also in Boston and Cambridge. But then there was folkies in California and San Francisco and even Los Angeles. And in Los Angeles, there was a guy named Steve Gillette who kind of arrived a bit late to the party. That is to say, he wasn't one of the original folkies, but he was a person certainly completely influenced by the folk scene. And in fact, if you go on Wikipedia and look for him, it's just him and a woman singer. And there's almost no mention of his life prior to those two singing together much later in the 80s and such. But this song that we're going to listen to was written by him, and it's called Back on the Street Again. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at this a little differently. I'm going to play you the version I consider the best to be first. And it's a group, we're going to listen to the whole song, and it's a group called the Sunshine Company out of Southern California. And Steve Gillette was selling his songs at that point to different people. And I remember listening to this song on the radio in 1967 when it was a minor hit. And I enjoyed it, and I completely forgot about it. But I've been doing research and kind of reconstructing the way I heard music back in the 1960s, the late 60s, when I was about 12, 13 years old. What attracted me to music in the first place? So I would go to KFRC, which was the radio station I listened to the most, and I found and I paid attention to their charts. That once a week they would put out a chart of the top hits of the week and what was expected and all of this stuff. And I got a lot from those charts. And a radio station at that time was very different from what it would be about 4 or 5 years later. A radio station at that time was very local. It had hits that weren't hits anywhere else. And since I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, it had hits that were specific to California and San Francisco in a way in which people on the East Coast would never hear the same songs. A lot of them. So we had songs from the hippie movement that people didn't hear who were, say, in Boston or Florida. So I heard this song and never thought about it again. But when I was doing research, and then I came to this thing and I said, the first thing I would do is I'd go through the charts and see and then I would look for the song on YouTube, download it, and put it onto a playlist of music to listen to try to put myself in the frame of mind of what I was doing in March, very specific for this case, of 1967. So, but as soon as I saw the title, Back on the Streets Again, and then I saw the name of the group, I could immediately hum the song again, at least the chorus, in my mind, which I think says something fascinating about memory. There's stuff in your memory. It takes something to activate it, which is very fascinating. It's not. I often say, there are people who will say to me, "Well, Bern, I don't remember much," and I'm always laughing at them. It's just like, no. You don't want to remember much. There's a very big difference. You don't think you pay attention, but I could play something for you from your past, and bang, awaken it again, because it's still in there. That's the interesting thing. But that has this idea about memory. I made a whole, series of 10 videos on time and memory. But this song, as soon as I heard it again, I said, my goodness, this is like a masterpiece. And, the Sunshine Company, we now have a retro term for these kinds of bands. They tended to be from Southern California. They tended to have 2 or 3 vocalists at once. They tended to sing in harmonies. They tended to have this kind of light sound. But then again, that wouldn't stop them, like the Association, from doing something like Requiem for the Masses, which is a very dark song. But there were quite a few of these. There were bands like the Sandpipers. Nobody would ever buy a Sandpipers album. Because they were like, I don't know how to describe this. They were like hip music for people who weren't hip at all. It was like it was somewhere between folk rock and easy listening music. Now, these guys were a bit more superior than that, but when I heard this, the lyrics of the song just really got to me. And you could say, oh, this is about a guy who broke up with his girlfriend, and so he's back out walking the streets trying to get his head together. But he has some courage about facing the life now. It could be that. But the lyrics are so vague that it could also be, I lost my job. Or I literally lost my home and I'm on the streets again. And at one point he says, I used to think the world belonged to me, but now it belongs to someone else. And just imagine, it's the sense you get in life when you come up against a brick wall and you can't get through it. And I'm back on the streets again. I'm pounding that beat again. And so let's hear the Sunshine Company, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the song.
I'm back on the street again. Gotta stand on my own 2 feet again. And I'm walking that beat again. Remembering when, oh, remembering when. Got a tear in my eye again, reminding me that I might cry again, feeling sad, wondering why again, remembering when, oh, remembering when. Once I used to think that the world belonged to me. Now it belongs to someone else. So I'm thinking of me again. That's the way it's gonna be again, till the day I can be again. Remembering when, oh, remembering when. So I'm thinking of me again. That's the way it's gonna be again, till the day I can be again. Remembering when, oh, remembering when, oh, remembering when, remembering when.
So there you are, a little sunshine pop from the Sunshine Company. How perfect is that? Now, in the folky scene, around the same time, I believe it was after this, I think that the Sunshine Company actually recorded this first, and then Steve Gillette on Vanguard Records recorded his own version of the song. And this is an excellent version as well. Again, this, if you go to his Wikipedia page, doesn't even mention this song. It's like, I want to say in the finest Californianese, dude, this song rocks, and you don't even know it. This song is deep, and you're not mentioning that you wrote this on the Wikipedia page or whoever wrote it, because it is amazing. Let's listen to a little bit of Steve Gillette doing his own song.
I'm back on the street again. Gotta stand on my own 2 feet again. I'm walking that lonely beat again. Remembering when, oh, remembering when.
And then it turns out all sorts of people, all very obscure, have covered this song. So here's some sort of group called Swamp Water.
I'm back on the street again. Gotta stand on my own 2 feet again. And I'm walking that beat again. Remembering when, whoa, remembering when.
Just a guy named Rick Fannin.
Got a tear in my eye again, to remind me that I might cry again. Feeling sad and I'm wondering why again. Remembering when, oh, remembering when.
Here's the Sandpipers version of it, more smooth, more drifty, floaty.
I remember a time when I thought the world was mine. The world belongs to somebody else now, and I'm just standing in line.
Some organization called Runaway Express. Just a guy named Dave Gitlin doing this obviously much later. This is probably much closer to the present. He's probably remembering this song because, very few people do.
I'm back on the street again. Gotta stand on my own 2 feet again. I'm walking that lonely beat again.
And then here's some beat up, scraggly 45 single of some guy nobody remembers named Larry Lynn singing this obscure song. Obviously, way back then.
So I'm thinking of me again. That's the way it's gonna be again. Till the day I can be again. Remembering when, remembering when.
And then there's a group called The Colors, spelled Englishly.
So I'm thinking of me again. That's the way it's gonna be again. Till the day I can be again. Remembering when, whoa. Remembering when, whoa. Remembering when, whoa. Remembering when.
But what's really fascinating is that the biggest name to sing this song was Linda Ronstadt when she was with a group called the Stone Ponies. And this could have been a hit too. But here's the weird thing. This is the first time we get a woman singing this song. And all I can tell you is when a woman sings this song, it has a completely different feel. Now, this was the late 60s. And so women were starting to go to communes and they were, out on the street. But what does a woman singing "I'm back on the streets again" mean? That has a lot of weird implications because when we talk about women and the street, you immediately think of the streetwalker, the prostitute. And she's not singing that, but that does tell us something about the times. That a woman could sing this, and this could not have been sung by a woman in 1959, but this is about 1968. Let's give that a listen. Linda Ronstadt and Stone Ponies her first group before she became too popular.
I'm back on the street again. Gotta stand on my own 2 feet again. I'm walking that lonely beat again. Remembering when, oh, oh, remembering when. Got a tear in my eye again to remind me that I might cry again. Feeling sad and wondering why again. Remembering when, oh, oh, remembering when.
And the last 2 songs here, 2 of my very favorites. One, there is a group who is tremendously important to the history of American rock music. And if you were to ask me who are the greatest bands in California in the 1960s, I think I would have to put Love as either number 1 or 2. 2 being Creedence Clearwater Revival. Beach Boys would probably be 3, well, maybe the Byrds, but I'd still put Love above them all. I mean, there were so many bands in California in the 1960s, but I think Love was just a very different kind of band. For one thing, they didn't do the same kind of music all the time. So they would range from really, really hard-edged rock music, garage rock, to, in fact, they have what I consider the first like hardcore punk song, a song called 7 and 7 Is, just amazing, just explosive song, 1966. Look it up. Love, 7 and 7 Is. Go look and listen to that if you want some excitement. But then they have these kind of sweet songs, almost sunshine pop, but more adventurous. It's like you could tell the guy was listening on one hand to garage rock, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and on the other hand, Brazilian music, and Herb Alpert, and easy listening music, and Frank Sinatra, and well, he loved Bobby Darin. And all of these things mixed together. And their greatest album was called Forever Changes. And in fact, he was eventually put into prison for, the guy, Arthur Lee is this case of someone who is just so talented. And again, done in by acid, LSD, the psychedelics. Just too pickled in the punch, lost the plot, but he still eventually his band, all the band members were doing way too many drugs. Eventually by 1968, the original Love, his band, was no more. And then he formed another band, and he had different bands called Love. So we'll call this Arthur Lee and Love. And now the following song is called Everybody's Gotta Live. And you may know this song if you saw the movie JoJo Rabbit. Near the end of the movie. And you may know this song if you saw Taika Waititi's movie Jojo Rabbit, which is a very interesting mix of satire and serious content about a child's imaginary friend during World War II who happens to be Adolf Hitler. Watch Jojo Rabbit. And actually, let's listen to a little bit of the song with some of the images from the movie.
Everybody's gotta live, and everybody's gonna die. Everybody's gotta live. I think you know the reason why. Sometimes I go and get so good, then again it gets pretty rough. But when I have you in my arms, baby, you know I just can't get enough. Oh yeah, everybody.
Everybody's gotta live. Yes, they do. And everybody's gonna die. Everybody's gotta live.
Now that's kind of the good-timey version of the song. It's a great song, and in fact, using that song in that movie kind of dragged from total obscurity this great song, Everybody's Gotta Live. And it went slightly viral. Here's a girl, in fact, singing this. She's just doing it on the viral instrument of the last decade or so, the ukulele. And a teen girl doing the song. She does a nice version. She makes it so pretty. Listen.
Everybody's gotta live. Everybody's gotta die. And everybody's gotta live. Before you know the reason why. Sometimes the going gets so good, but then again gets pretty tough. When I have you in my arms, baby, you know I just can't get enough. 'Cause everybody's gotta live, and everybody's gotta die, and everybody's gotta live. Before you know the reason why.
But when I saw that movie, I love the fact they used the later 70s version, I think about 1974, 75. But back at home, they put out an album called Love Lost of music that was lost from Love from Arthur Lee in 1971. And contained on there is my all-time favorite version of Everybody's Gotta Live. And this is, I believe, the original version, much more intense, does not include the bridge with a different tune in it, and it's a very powerful piece. And you really get an idea here of how intense Arthur Lee could be. And so we're going to listen to that now, and of course there was no official video of this. And there were a few videos of him doing it live, but with different tempos. But I managed to re-edit it so that this is the video for Arthur Lee's and Love, the Love of 1971, of their version, their rare, intense version of Everybody's Gotta Live.
Everybody's gotta live. Everybody's gotta die. Everybody's gotta live. Before you know the reason why. Sometimes the going gets so good, then again it gets pretty rough. But when I have you in my arms, baby, you know I just can't get enough. Oh yeah, everybody's gotta live. Everybody's gonna die. Everybody's gotta live. You gotta live before you know the reason why. I saw a blind man standing on the corner yesterday, baby. He couldn't hardly tie his shoes, but he had a harmonica and a guitar strapped around his neck, and he sure could play the blues. Oh yeah! Everybody's gotta live. Everybody's gonna die. Everybody's gotta live. You gotta live before you know the reason why. a dream the other night, baby. I dreamt that I was all alone. But when I woke up, I took a look around myself. I was surrounded by 50 million strong. Oh, yeah, everybody's gotta live. Everybody's gonna die. Everybody's gotta live. You gotta live before you know the reason why. Hey, everybody's gotta live. Everybody's gonna die. Everybody's gotta live before you know the reason why. Oh, everybody's gotta live. Everybody's gonna die. Everybody's gotta live. You gotta live before you know the reason why. Yeah! Everybody's gotta live. Really? Everybody's gonna die. Woo! Everybody's gotta have a good time. Sure enough, before you know the reason why. Everybody's gotta live. Everybody's gonna die. Everybody's gotta live.
And finally, I've often thought, I have 13,000 records in Alaska. I have a few more extras here. CDs, vinyls, singles. I've heard a few songs. And to get into the top 10, they really have to mean something to me. And this next one would definitely be in my top 20 or 10. I haven't really ever done the list of what are the greatest songs, but I know this would be somewhere near the top. And this is my favorite obscure female performer in rock music. Her name is Holly Beth Vincent. Back in the early 80s, she had a band called Holly and the Italians, which put out a total of one record. And then she put out a record. What had happened, she's actually from California. Really inspired by garage rock, she was in a rockabilly band when she was young for a while. That gets all sorts of cred from me. I mean, if you're a teenager in a rockabilly band, you are beyond cool. You are actually educated musically. I mean, because what teenagers in any period want to do is what everybody else is doing. And to do something that good, that interesting, that different, you just get tons of cred from me. Well, anyway, so she formed this punk band, and she had heard that the UK punk scene was happening. So she ended up there, and people saw her performing with her bandmates, and so she was recorded. And the album kind of came out a little too late for the punk wave. And it was a little brighter than most punk music, but I would still consider it more of a garage rock album in many ways. And life got weird, we'll just say, in the UK for her. Eventually she had to leave, but coming out of a broken relationship, in the middle of all this turmoil, a certain amount of it undoubtedly she brought on herself. She recorded another album called Holly Beth Vincent. Great, she's used her name. And the name of the album was Holly and the Italians. A big mistake. Because all the people who liked Holly and the Italians were more like they wanted punk music. And what she gave them was something much more personal and inventive and alternative, to use that cliched phrase. But this was like 1982. And I remember I was working in a record store at the time in New York City, and my punk friends just turned their nose up at that thing because it was no longer punk, it was something else, or what we would now just consider very good music. I listened to both those albums when they came out. I liked them. And here's what I discovered. By the end of the 1980s, I was listening to those more than most other albums. And a lot of stuff had come out after that. I had a lot of music by that time. But I just found her musical sense, her melodic structures, her harmonic sense, her lyrics, endlessly fascinating. And like, you want to know what she's talking about, which she makes difficult because she sings in this kind of drawl which mangles words together. Just, and even this, I pretty much know everything she's singing about in this song we're about to hear called Love Letter. But and I played it for a friend the other day, and he just said, that's a great song. I don't know what it was about. And he's American, because that's just the way she sings. And she has her own, she's in Hollywood, and she has her own world. Anyway, she ended up being in New York City when I was there, and one of my big regrets is I never bumped into her anywhere, which I really would have liked to, because she was kind of, I wouldn't want to say over the hill, in her 20s at that time, but she was basically trying to figure, her record company dumped her because, hey, you're not really selling, and they do that sort of thing. But meanwhile, she soldiered on, and she kept recording demos. But these demos, she would record a demo, go look at it, and I don't know what. Genius for obscurity, making herself hard to follow, puts it in a drawer, does that. In the 1990s, or early 90s, she moved back to Southern California, to her home turf. And then she had another band with her genius for obscurity. She named it The Oblivious and didn't put her name on the cover anywhere, which is like shooting yourself in the foot. She has, like I say, her whole career is kind of like one foot shot after another, which is sad because her music is great. And I often say, if the world was fair, Madonna would be a footnote in the 1980s, and she would rate a whole chapter, because her music is that great. And for my money, her music, she was easily the best female singer of the 1980s, especially for the song I'm about to play you. But if it wasn't for Nick Cave, who kind of squeaks in at the top, she would be the best singer of the 1980s, by far. She is one of my all-time favorite singers. Well, obviously with a name like The Oblivious and not putting your own name on it, that album sunk without a trace. And then she put out another album, which I still don't quite get, called Vowel Movement. Did have a curious song called Jesus on it, which brings me up to a thing. I noticed that her songs would occasionally reference God. But I always felt like she was wrestling with God. And there were certain times, and certainly on the first album, where she was just like, kind of like God, and put her finger up in the air. And other times where it was just like God, and it was like a prayer. And I was trying to figure out, well, who's winning here? Well, I lost touch of following her music at all. And then around 2007 or so, I think, around that time, 2007, 2008, I realized she had put out a couple of albums. And one of them was this weird album of all these demos called Demos Federico. I guess that goes with Holly and the Italians. Another totally obscure name and title. And certainly just something she had made, and I mean, her albums were eventually reissued briefly on CD and then sank again into the realm of collector's items that cost a lot of money. And in fact, last time I looked at Demos Federico on Amazon, it was something like $60 or $70. And in my opinion, worth every penny. And it was a double CD set. And what she said was she had all this stuff, these demos, in a drawer, in a dresser, in her house, or something like that, or in a closet. And she didn't know what to do with them. She was thinking of just throwing them out. And she showed them to a friend, and the friend said, can I listen to those? And then they looked and said, this stuff is great. Let's put it out. So they put it out. When I first heard that I mean, almost every song, I mean, there are a couple that don't miss, but that's 2 CDs worth. 20, 30, 40 songs. Amazing stuff. And the top, when I first heard this, I just said, what is that? And it's a song called Love Letter. And you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, it's about someone sending a love letter. Oh, you would be wrong. And the love letter in question, well, I'll let you try to figure it out when you listen. But one of the things I love about this is that this is a rock epic. It's about 7 minutes long. Now, most rock epics are kind of structured like this. You have the Hotel California kind, that you have chorus and chorus, verse, chorus, and finally a long instrumental. Layla does this as well. You have like something like Freebird, which kind of builds and builds and builds and gets faster. You have, these longer songs, these rock epics, have certain formulas, and she doesn't follow them at all. She essentially is doing a long garage rock song with a surf guitar. Surf guitar, like Dick Dale invented this sound in Southern California. It's just this it almost sounds very nervous of they call it shredding, where you take your pick and you go like this. And she uses this sound throughout the whole album, the whole song pretty much. Not every second of it, but a lot of it. Then she has the confidence, and I say it's confidence because most people would never have the nerve to do this, to wait at least a minute before even singing. and building this mood. The whole thing is much more modal than anything. It's just this modal structure of you're inside this thing. And she'll do things like just kind of hum along, it's very odd stuff. And yet it works so well. She'll stop in the middle of the song for another minute break. But here's the thing. Most people, when they do these breaks, there's like a guitar solo. And in this one, there's some guitar noodling in the background, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is this modal structure. And it's just the build-up on this, after a while, it's just bigger and bigger. Now, I listened to this to put this video together, which, of course, there is no video for this. I found these low-quality videos of her online, on YouTube, and I took them and I kind of cut them up and played with them, and I realized I'm not going to make these look any better than the fuzzy video quality they are. So let's go the other way around then. Let's make them look really bad. I did a bit of that when I was doing the video for Arthur Lee, but this time I went, let's just make these look really strange. And so I took videos from different periods. I mean, there's one point here, it cuts 13 years have gone by, but you don't notice it because she looks roughly the same, although that's in itself is a question. I think if I was walking down the street, I would never be able to recognize her because I've seen her in so many different appearances in photos and on record covers. I mean, does she have short hair? Does she have long hair? Does she have shaved hair or silver hair? Is she smiling? Is she snarling? Is she, frowning? And her face looks totally different each time. She is what I would call mercurial. She looks differently depending on whatever is going through her head. And I mean, literally, I've seen tons of photos of her, and I'm obviously putting a few of them here, and I still can't get an idea of what she actually looks like because it's hard to put all those together. Plus, of course, she's aged a bit since then. She's about a year younger than me, so she'd be in her 60s now. 65. Ooh. And but it doesn't matter because the music is here. And what is the song about? Well, it's a song about innocence, addiction, faith in God, finding a purpose, and giving to others. I would put it simply like that. She reflects a bit about how confused she was in childhood. At a certain point, she prays, but she says, I shook and I shivered and I prayed to God above. Well, I can guarantee you that shook and shivered part is about drug addiction and withdrawals. But she prays to God above, and God says, little girl, you are lonely and what you need is love. I'm going to write you a love letter. And so right there, this is like whiplash you're getting here, going from the darkest part of her to wanting faith, wanting God to help her. And what is the love letter? Is it that God is simply loving her? Is it the Bible? Is it, listening to, reading something? I don't know, but obviously it has to do with God in a Christian sense. The last I actually ever heard of her was I would occasionally run into her on various social media, which would tend to last a couple of months and then she would disappear. And then a couple of months here, and then she would disappear. That is to say, she was never there all the time. And one time I saw her write something about what she believed, and then she got dogpiled by her rather secular followers, and so she immediately deleted that. And this was back around 2010 or so. And you get the sense in listening to the song of this battle going on inside of her. And at one point she says, I've got a devil on one side, I've got an angel on the other side. But oddly, then she says, I've got a devil on one side. It's like the devil is twice, the angel is once. But nevertheless, in the end, she says, well, if you don't understand this, it's just a story. Well, it's not just a story. It's about her life. And but one of the things she says is other people have problems too. It's not just me. And what you need to do is you need to write them a love letter. And she's not talking about stalking people and following them. She is talking about doing something for other people besides yourself. Eventually she gave birth. She had a boy. I don't know what happened to that relationship, but her child was very much, and you could see this in the Oblivious album, very much a source of pride for her. And again, all of this is just bits and pieces. I've been kind of trying to put together who in the heck she is for ages. But all I know is she is one of the most important singers. And once you start listening to her music, you got to like rock music. If you're one of these people who wants, slick pop, electronic stuff, although she's done electronic music too. And it's kind of odd and quirky, which is, I would expect nothing less. But her melodic sense is just, to me, there are very few people who can write a melodic line like her or the harmonics to go with it. And that includes what's going on in the background. So, okay, I've gushed on and on. Holly Beth Vincent. This is her love letter to you. So there you are. I ended up talking way too long about this stuff. But, you know, I just wanted to share some music that I find really fascinating that most likely you've never run into. And I find that just simply randomly looking for music on the internet is a hazardous thing. How do you know what to look for? I think to curate someone's listening experience, when people used to come into stores when I worked in record stores, my first thought was never to, and I knew people who worked at the stores who would try to recommend their favorite stuff to people. But what I realized is, I don't know who this person is. I don't know what they like. So I'd ask them, what kind of music do you like? And if they said something I didn't necessarily like, by them telling me who they liked, I could still find something that they might find interesting because I knew enough about the music. So, I'm going to call it quits. Thanks for letting me rant on and play you a few songs. I hope you enjoyed it. And like, share, subscribe, contribute, do whatever you have to do. Remember, Anadromist means going against the stream, and listening to good music that's obscure and sometimes not popular at all is a way of going against the stream. To find the things that people have left behind for you to find that have a great deal of meaning and that you need to hear. So, as the Georgians say, droabit.
A people without history is not redeemed from time. For history is a pattern of timeless moments.